Hi everyone, so today, like Jessica said, we're going to go over digital objects, what they are and how you can create them in ArchivesSpace. So before we start creating them, I want to basically go over what it means to have a digital object in ArchivesSpace. So ArchivesSpace enables the description of digital objects, such as your digitized archival resources or born digital materials. So digital objects so ArchivesSpace is not a digital content management system. That's something that everyone should understand. It does not preserve and store digital materials. It's just a form of linking to where they exist, whether that be in a file server or in your digital content management system, such as like Islandora, Preservica, Content DM. So using ArchivesSpace will not preserve them. It will just form that link. So a digital object record in ArchivesSpace is essentially the metadata of that record. So you can add descriptive information that supports discovering the item in your public user interface for your finding aids. And then you can also add the content file, which is that link. So it's about the information within that digital object. So if it's a PDF, if it's a text file, that kind of thing. If it's a TIFF, a JPEG, you can add that content to your record so people know what kind of file they're looking at. And then it's the link to where that actual file lives, you want people to see. So if it's in a digital collections website and you want to link to that, you can do that. So in ArchivesSpace, you're able to create two different kinds of digital objects. You can create a simple object or a complex object. So a simple being just that one image, that one text file. It's a single level structure, such as like the top level of a resource record. But complex refers to if you have scanned 24 pages out of a diary and you want to represent all 24 pages of that diary as individual records in the same digital object record, you would create a complex digital object record. So there's various ways to do that. And I'll show an example of a complex digital object, but we won't create one of those today. We'll just be creating simple. So there's different use cases for using ArchivesSpace digital object records. So one of them could be you want to use ArchivesSpace as your primary management and publication platform for digital object records. But another one being you use a different system to manage digital objects, but you want accession and resource records in ArchivesSpace to link to those digital objects. So depending on you as an institution, you decide what works best for you, because you don't have to use digital objects. It's just an option in ArchivesSpace. And you can make them as simple or as complex as you want them to be, depending on how best it fits your institution. You can read more about digital objects in the workbook, as well as about the use cases and determine what fits your needs. So let's get into creating a digital object record. So you can create digital object records in multiple ways. From the create menu, you can import them via a CSV file, and you can import them and link them directly to archival objects through the load via spreadsheet button of a resource record. So we're going to create from the create menu. So when you do that, you see a blank digital object record. The only required fields of a digital object record is the title and identifier. And identifiers for digital objects must be unique throughout the repository. So a digital object can't have the same identifier as another one. But those are the only two required fields. From there, you can just start adding various sub-records, but that is dependent on you as an institution, whether or not you want to do that. So for us, we actually create our digital objects using Spreadsheet. So I'm gonna go to a different page here. So we have spreadsheets that upload to our Islandora instance, and then we take the spreadsheets and rework them to fit our needs for ArchivesSpace to add the digital objects that link to our Islandora instance. So this is not the full spreadsheet that we use, it's just some of the parts of that spreadsheet. So we're gonna add this photograph titled Josephine Dibble Murphy to ArchivesSpace. So we're gonna copy this title. And for us, we basically map the various fields and for the digital object from the spreadsheet. So we're gonna paste that here. Now we're gonna go back and get the identifier. Identifiers can include letters, numbers, and even periods. So it can include symbols, underscores. We're gonna use that, and then we're just gonna save. So this, if you wanted to stop here, you could, but there's always more you can add to a digital object record. So as we move down, we'll get into that. So you can publish from this top level, but as you can see up here, digital objects also have the publish all feature, which will publish all the subrecords. You can choose a VRA core level. So that VRA core level, that just refers to, it's non-configurable, so you can't customize this list. And it's for use in multi-level VRA core compliant records to indicate that a description is about a collection, a work, or an image. So this is not required, but if you use VRA core level for your digital materials, you may want to consider using this field and basic information. The digital object type refers to the type of digital object this is, and this is a configurable list in your controlled value list, so you can add to this. It's just, these are just the default. So we're gonna choose still image. You can also add restrictions to your digital objects if they are restricted and you don't want people to access them, or they can only access a certain version of this. You can check the subscription box and add a access use restriction note. You do not have to publish your digital objects. So if these are on a file server and you don't want external people, researchers accessing these, you can leave these unpublished and just have them accessible for your staff so they can see the data and be able to access them from ArchivesSpace. So that is an option. So once you've entered the required information, and other information in basic information, you can move on to the next subrecord, which is file version. File versions are unique to digital objects. No other records in ArchivesSpace have this subrecord. And this is where you would add that link and add content file, like if it's a PDF and stuff, to this digital object record. What's required if you choose to open this file is the file URI. And this is a link to where it exists in your digital content management system on the web, or a link to the file directory. So that file server path, that's where you would add that information. So if you wanted to publish the basic information separately from the file version, if you didn't want this published, you could choose not to publish this so people don't have access to that, but they just know about the digital object. So we're going to go back to our spreadsheet. And for us, we use handle links. So I'm going to copy this handle link. I'm going to paste it here. And when this is published, this will become a link that people can click on. So you can choose a use statement. This is a list you can configure as well. And it indicates the use for which the digital file is intended. Is it a thumbnail? Is it a master copy? Is it just the access copy, that kind of thing? So if this is information you want to have associated with the digital objects, you can choose that. Then you have the Xlink Actuate attribute and the Xlink Show attribute, and these work in conjunction with each other. So they are non-configurable. The Xlink Actuate attribute is used during export to indicate how the digital object should display in the context of an EAD document, whether it occurs automatically or it must be requested by the user. So as I said, it's used in conjunction with the Xlink Show attribute. So from the drop-down list, you can choose none, on load, on request, other. And this affects how it appears in the public user interface and whether or not that digital object will load then or by request of the user. The Xlink Show attribute is used during export to indicate how the target of a link should display in the context of an EAD document. So whether in the same browser, so if you were to click on it, it would open in that same window, or in a new window or tab, meaning you would still have the public user interface open and then a new tab would open showing you where that link goes to the digital object. So you can choose new you can choose embed, new, none, other, replace. Replace will replace that window and show this one here. New will open up a new tab. Embed will embed the digital object. That's in use when you decide if you want to use a thumbnail, you can embed it on the in the public user interface. The next option is file format name. So that is also a field that you can configure. You can choose the name of the format for that file. So it can be a GIF, a JPEG, a PDF, a TIFF. So these are just the spelled out names of those types of files. So we'll say this is a JPEG. You can choose the version. So if it's a JPEG 2000, you can write that here. You can also give file size in bytes. So is this 100 kilobytes, 10 megabytes? You can refer to that here. A checksum, if you have checksum on your digital materials, you can add that here and then choose the method for which the checksum was created. So it has this drop-down list that you can configure if you use a method outside of these default methods. And then you can also add a caption, and that would appear under the digital object on the public user interface. So people can see more information and just have a caption for it. You can add multiple file versions. And whichever one is first, because you can move these, would be the first link that they would see. And so that way, that's what they would click on first. So if you have a master copy and you want them to not click on that, you can also just leave it unpublished, but you can have that link in here too. So you can have links to the web version or the thumbnail, the access copy or the working copy that you're using, or even the master. So you can have all those links in here. You can publish all of them or leave one published or not published, but that first one will be the first that appears to the user on the public user interface. So as you're going through, you have options to add other subrecords such as languages. So from our spreadsheet, we see that some of our digital objects do have languages, but this one says no linguistic content. So you can do that with languages. So if it's an image, but this is a required field that you use, you can choose that from the drop-down or type ahead here. You can add dates if you have dates associated with your digital objects and you want to make that metadata appear. Make sure it's associated with it. And since it's a circuit date, I'm going to make sure it includes all of the 1950s and the machine readable begin and end date. You can add extent. And this can be an extent based on file size. So if this is in gigabytes, megabytes, that kind of thing, you can add that to this if you want the information shown. But as you saw in the file version, you have the ability to add file size there. So you can use the file size field in file version or use extent if you'd like. So you have that option. You can add agent links to this. So if you want to associate a person, organization with this digital object, if you have that kind of information associated with your digital materials, you can add that, as well as add subjects. And we'll be going over how to create both of those later today. And you can add notes. So if you have access or use restrictions on these digital object materials, or if this is an internal thing and you want to add notes to this, you have the option to choose from all the various note types that are generally associated with records in ArchivesSpace. So you have most of them here, if not all. And then there's ability to add write statements and metadata write declarations. So for us, we do add write statements, and this is just our general write statement. We add these to all our digital objects, so I'm just going to go ahead and add it just to show you. We always choose other. Policy, start date is whenever we created this record. And then our note type is usually additional information. We don't label it, and we just paste it in there. So this note is associated with any digital object we add, so people have the rights information, but it's also already in our Islandora instance as well. So as you scroll down, you also see that you can add collection management subrecords and a user-defined subrecord. So those, like other records, are available to you. So once we're done adding all the information we want to add to a digital object record, we would save it, and then if we want to publish all of it, we would just click Publish All, read through the note, and select Publish All. So it has been published. We'll give it a second to re-index. You can see what we've added to it, and you can edit this or add more as you see fit. But yeah, it takes a minute. And as you go through whatever you're using to create your digital objects, you can continue to create them. You see that with the digital object record, similar to resource and accession records, you have really added events you can export, which we'll go over Wednesday. You can merge digital objects if you created the same one more than once. You can transfer this to a different repository, and you have the ability to create an assessment on a digital object record. You can also suppress and delete them if you need to. We'll go over in a second how to do rapid data entry, because that is an option if you're creating complex digital objects with multiple levels, because you can do that if you are similar to resource records. Okay, and this is our digital object record. So this is the record in the public user interface. This is our link. I don't know where the caption is. I think that might be a bug. Oh, I knew I did that wrong. Anyways, this links to our finding aid instance, because I chose the wrong handling when I did this. But as you can see, the link resolves into a new tab rather than opening on the same window. You can see all the information we added to it for write statement. But you can see the identifier, and then the language of materials and the date. So we're gonna go and actually attribute this to a resource record, an archivable object. We're gonna look for dado. We're gonna edit the resource record. We'll see that there's a photograph series, and there's a Josephine Dibble Murphy file with that photograph. So to link a digital object to an archival object or a resource record, you would go to instances. You can also link these to accession records if you'd like. Instead of choosing container instance, we're going to choose add digital object. And from here, you can type ahead, you can browse, or you can create. If you create from here, it's the same as creating from the create menu, except you cannot create complex digital objects from create when linking it to an archival object or an accession record. So if you wanted to create complex, I would recommend creating that separately and then linking it later. Because once you create this once you click that, it just links to it rather than giving you the ability to add on to the hierarchy. I always recommend when you're adding digital objects to search by the identifier, because that will bring up the exact one you want. If you have the same name for multiple digital objects, you may not be sure which one to choose. So I would go into Browse, filter the text by the identifier, and it will bring up the one you're looking for, because all identifiers must be unique for this repository for digital objects. So once you've linked it, you can save the archival object, and now it is associated with this file in the Jane Doe papers. And you can see where we would normally see the type of container instance, we also see a digital object record. So it adds it to the hierarchy, and then you can see there's an instance associated with this. Before I move on, I wanted to see if there's any questions about simple digital object records.
Thanks, Brittany. Yeah, there are a couple questions. One person was asking to see how to link it to a resource record, which you just did. But if there are any more questions about that, please do type those in to the Q&A. And then there was another question. It's a good question. Rebecca asked, so when you were talking about simple versus complex, is a simple digital object like a map and a complex digital object like a scrapbook? Yeah, I can answer that, or you can answer that.
Yeah, so simple can be the single image, the single map, but scrapbooks, like if you want to make sure every page is represented in your ArchivesSpace digital object record, you can do that. But if it was scanned as one item, you could link it as one item, or if you have each one as its individual page within your management system, you can link each individual page to various component records as a part of the digital object record. And if you want to make sure various things like, oh, there's an image in here and then we scanned it separately, you can link that as its own component record. And I will show after rapid data entry actually an example of a complex digital object.
Cool. Great, perfect, thanks. Yeah. Like Brittany said, a scrapbook could be either a simple object or a complex object. You really need to sort of decide internally how you want to express your digital objects, and that depends on what you want to get out of using the digital objects module in ArchivesSpace. If you're looking specifically to like export EAD and you want those digital objects to be included in your EAD exports of your resource records, then you're going to want to create simple digital objects. If you're looking for more of like metadata management of the actual digital objects, then complex might be the way to go. But something like a scrapbook or a book could be simple or complex, just depending if it's a book that's one single PDF that's 100 pages long, that's a simple digital object. If each of those 100 pages is an individual PDF, that can be a complex digital object. So it's sort of up to you and how you want to do it. And then do you have any examples of complex? You're going to show us complex in just a second. Someone says, can we see what the linked digital object looks like from the public facing side? You did show that earlier, but maybe after you make the complex, you can show us again. Or after you do rapid data entry, you can show us again.
Yeah, I can.
Elizabeth asks, what does transfer do? Transfer allows you to move it to a different repository in your ArchivesSpace. So let's say that you're an administrator or someone who has access to multiple repositories and you accidentally created this record in the wrong department, you can just transfer it over. Or if the one department transfers the item to another department, you could also then make that transfer within ArchivesSpace. And you can do that for digital objects as well as resource records.
Yeah, and because digital objects are only in one repository, so them resource records and accession records are unique to the repository. They're not shared throughout the implementation.
If you only have one repository in your ArchivesSpace, that doesn't apply. You can't transfer it. You only have one place. Can you link one digital object to multiple resource records?
You can. So it can be associated with different resource records, and you can link multiple digital objects to one archival object.
All right, very cool.
I don't know how that works intellectually, why it would be in multiple collections, but that's up to you to figure out as an institution.
All right, it looks like we're all caught up on the Q&A. Let me check chat. Right, okay, so there's a couple questions in the chat. If you could please put your questions in the Q&A, it's a lot easier to manage if all of the questions for the trainers or for Brittany or Malaka are going into the Q&A, since there's a lot happening in my chat. Is there a process for ingesting the entire spreadsheet of digital objects at once? There are a couple different import options for digital objects. Brittany, are you going to go over any of those today? I know we're going to talk about imports and exports on Wednesday, but I can talk a little bit about digital object imports today too, if you weren't going to cover it.
I can show it. I can show the spreadsheet and show how that looks like, and for link load via spreadsheet.
Okay.
And I can show them where to get to the CSV file for the other type of import. All
right, sounds good. Well, if you're going to do that, then it looks like we are all caught up.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll show you guys rapid data entry, and then I'll go back to the public side so you guys can see what this looks like in terms of a resource record when you're finding it. So if you wanted to create a complex digital object, you could add child, or you can do rapid data entries, similar to how you would in a resource record. So when clicking on this button, you will see that it has 36 columns. And the only thing really different for rapid data entry than a resource record is this file version. So that is unique to digital objects, as I said, and available in rapid data entry. So if you wanted to, you could add all your children through this rapid data entry. And it's the same basic concept as the resource record. You can apply a template. You can save that template and reuse it. You can uncheck ones you don't want to use, and those will disappear, and you can make columns sticky. So you can set this up if you are making a lot of digital objects at once. I recommend not making more than you would do in like an hour, or actually like 30 minutes, because as stated probably on the first day, if you walk away from ArchivesSpace and you haven't saved something, ArchivesSpace after an hour will log you out, and then it will not automatically save anything. So if you're working in rapid data entry, you want to be able to save these before walking away so you don't lose that data and have to recreate this over again. So I generally don't make like more than 20 rows at a time when working with our rapid data entry. So now it's more manageable, and we can go through and add what we want to this. If something is the same and you want to keep it sticky, you can do that, like the label or the title. But if they're changing, you would want to unstick it. So when you add a new row, it doesn't copy that information. So that's basically how you would do rapid data entry for digital objects, very similar to resource records. Now I want to navigate back to the public user interface. So if we view this digital object, you can now see where it's linked. So this are linked records. The resource records is Jane Doe paper, it's a part of photographs, and this is a file they're a part of. If we were to go to the Jane Doe papers from here, we could scroll down to photographs and click on Justine Dibble Murphy, and you would see this digital object linked in this file record. So you could click on this here, and it would take you to where that exists. It would take you to the digital object. If you have more than one, you can see all the digital material associated with this record under this part of the record, so under digital material. And any digital material in your repository and your implementation that has been published will appear under the Digital Materials tab. So that's handy. So you can see all, and then you have a way of filtering those. And if you were on the home screen and you were searching, you can also just limit to digital materials in order to find results that are just digital materials. It's very handy when users just want to view things online, whatever you have available online. So now I'm going to navigate to a complex object example that I created. Edit mode. So this is a complex digital object. So this is a book that I have created a hierarchy of chapters. And within the chapters, there are pages for this one, and then there are illustrations for these. Like research records, you can get fairly granular with this, but it really depends on what you want to do as an institution and how complex you want to make these digital objects. So this top one represents the book, the overall book. And then as we go down, we get each chapter, and this is a page within that chapter, and this is an illustration within the second chapter. When you're creating the children or the component records of a digital object record, what's required is either a title or a label. So those are conditionally required. It's either or, so you don't have to do both. You're not even required to add an identifier. That is just optional. And you can use dates as titles here, similar to archival object records. So for here, we added a label of chapter 1. We gave the title. So if there was a title to this chapter, you could put that here. And if you have an identifier associated with the file that goes with this, you would add that to the identifier. And then if you had links to this chapter as it was its pages or even the title page for the chapter, you could add that as a file version here and link to it so people see just the page for that chapter, or just see that chapter if it's just a single, if it's a PDF of all the pages of that chapter. But if it wasn't, it was just a title, you could continue the hierarchy going down to the pages as well. And this chapter, we've identified that it has illustrations, and we've separated those out and made scans or digitized those illustrations and want to make sure we link to those. So if you were digitizing a book and wanted to do this the way you could, if you have a Born Digital collection, you could create this hierarchy as well. You could create how it looks on the your server. So the various folders and the folders within the folders and the files within those files. You can also, that really depends on you as an institution, because if you use digital objects and make them complex and you want to export EAD, you can, the EAD that will export is only the top level of the digital object. It doesn't export EADs for component records. So if you're not using the public user interface for ArchivesSpace and you're using a separate one, and you want to make sure you have all this EAD represented, you're not getting it exported from here. So that is just something to remember. And also when you link to a archival object, you're linking this top level of a complex object. You can't link individual component records. You're linking the whole record to the archival object, and then they have to open the digital object to see these components. So do we have any questions about complex or digital objects in general?
Thanks, Brittany. Yeah. There was another question about importing digital objects, and then there was also a question about how to display as a thumbnail, which I can go over that in a second. But if you want to hold off on those questions until you're finished with digital objects, we can tackle those then.
Yeah, I'll let you do thumbnail.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so we'll navigate back to my Google Drive folder here. And this I'm showing you right now is the import spreadsheet, the bulk import spreadsheet for digital objects, similar to the archival object spreadsheet that you use with the load via spreadsheet button. This one is just for linking digital objects to archival objects. So you need to have created the archival object, and then you can link them. So what's required here is either the EAD identifier or the resource URI link with the from that resource record. And then you also either need the ref ID for the archival object or the archival object URI, so it can link to the correct archival object. And then you can build out your digital object. So it does not give you everything that is available to you in a digital object record. If you wanted to add more information than what's on the screen here, you would have to create them either using a different import, which is our CSV file, which I'll show you how to get to that, or through the just creating it in ArchivesSpace, or you could create these and then edit them later. That is up to you. You can add an ID, a title. You can choose whether or not to go ahead and publish it. And you can add a link for just a digital object and a link for the thumbnail. So these will do default actuate showing. So if you do link for the digital object, the default actuate is on request, and the default Xlink show, show is new. And then for thumbnail, the actuate link is attribute is on load, and the Xlink show attribute is embed, and that will embed thumbnail. So you can link two file versions through this. So those are the only options you have for linking these. And then when you go back to ArchivesSpace, and we'll just navigate to a resource record. From the top, the only way you can link these is by the top level of the resource record, because this is the only place where you have the option to add digital objects to archival objects. So you would choose this, select your file. You can validate if you prefer, which I recommend just in case. And then you would import the spreadsheet, and it would link those digital objects and create them separately, and they will publish if you choose to publish or not be published. So you will at the same time link and create digital objects through that spreadsheet. However, if you just want to create a bunch of digital objects at one time through a CSV import, you can go to ArchivesSpace and get the template record. So using ArchivesSpace, migration, tools, and data mapping, you scroll down and you would click on the digital object CSV template. It would take you to GitHub, and then you're able to download this by right-clicking on raw. This is basically the EAD mapping. You're able to add, I'm pretty sure, all the fields of a digital object, but it does not link to an archival object record. So you can import all of these through that, but then you would need to link them. And in ArchivesSpace to do that, which we'll go over background jobs later, but you would just go down to background jobs and then import data, and you would choose digital object CSV from here. And then you would add your file, and it would create all of the digital objects, but it will not link them. So those are the two options for major digital object importing. It really depends on you as an institution, what data you want with your digital objects, and if you want to link them when you add them. I think that's all I wanted to go over.
Thanks, Brittany. That was a whirlwind. There are a couple questions in the chat. I've been answering some of them. I did drop, or in the Q&A, I did drop into the chat. Well, no, I put it for hosted panelists. Hold on. I'm going to drop into the chat for everyone a direct link to the migration tools and data maps that Brittany just showed us. It's also linked in the resources on your agenda, but that's where you can go to get those templates that she just showed. So it's important to remember, like Brittany said, if you are using the load via spreadsheet function and are creating digital objects and linking them to those pre-existing archivable objects, you use the template for that and you invoke that through load via spreadsheet. If you're just looking to import a bunch of digital objects, not linking them to archivable objects don't have to exist in ArchivesSpace to be linked to them to create digital objects. You would use the digital object CSV template and you would use that as a background job. Since there's two different ways to get that information into ArchivesSpace, it's important to remember which place you're invoking those functions. Because if you try to run that digital object CSV on load via spreadsheet, it's not going to work, and then you're just going to get a bunch of errors. But it's two great ways to get digital objects into ArchivesSpace. There is a question. Abby asks, did you say that you can only link the digital object to the top level of an archival object?
It will.
Go for it. No, you're good.
So you can only import the spreadsheet from the top level of a resource record. So that's the only time you have that option, but you are identifying in the spreadsheet what archival objects it will link to within that resource record. So that spreadsheet is for already created archival objects. But I also want to point out that if you use the bulk import for archival objects, you have the ability to create digital objects in that spreadsheet as well. So there's like 3 spreadsheets that have digital objects as a way to import them.
Yeah. So if you're using load via spreadsheet and you're trying to get your archival objects into ArchivesSpace and you already have digital objects to link to them, you go ahead and link to them in that spreadsheet. But if you've already created those archival objects and later have completed a digitization project or something, that's when you would use the spreadsheet Brittany just showed. Let's see, other questions in the chat. I think other than I'll show what a thumbnail looks like. Other than that, I think we're all good. I did want to ask you, Brittany, maybe you could talk a little bit about how the AUC treats born digital material in ArchivesSpace and why you do it that way.
Yeah, so for our born digital material, we find it best because it is a collection to create a resource record and then create digital objects for all the files we plan to associate with it. So we build it out from collection level, series, sub-series if required or created, and then files would be the files that are in the that are a part of the collection. So it looks like it would on our file server, and then so each one has a digital object associated with it, and that's how we do it, which makes I've actually used the import tool to create both the archival objects and digital objects at the same time because they don't have container instances, they have digital instances. So that way I add an instance to those records. And for us, it makes more sense to do that because digital objects solely are found in the digital materials, and it's not linking to a collection if you just have them by themselves, because you can create them outside of archival objects. But this way, people know it's a collection within all of our collections. It's just digital. We also add an access note saying that this collection is completely digital and can be accessed through our digital collections website where the actual items themselves live. And if we have restrictions, like if they can only access them in the reading room, we have a note for that. And if it's a hybrid collection, we have a note for that as well.
So you're primarily creating, or you're exclusively creating simple digital objects. And if any hierarchy needs to be created, you're doing that as resource records?
Yes, the hierarchy is in that resource record, and we're adding the actual files, the link to the files themselves to the file record archival objects. So no complex, I haven't created any complex digital objects for the collections I've worked on. They've just been simple.
That's a good solution.
But that's only one way to do it. You can figure it out for your institution, what works best for you.
Malaka, does your institution use digital objects in ArchivesSpace?
Yes, we do. We create the resource record for, you know, the paper and all that stuff, and it later gets digitized. And our metadata person uses the API to add them. So we for the most part, get to be out of that process. We have committees upon committees trying to figure out what to do about born digital. Right now, I think they're more worried about preservation than actually presenting them to the public.
Yeah. All right, well, thanks. Yeah, the API is a great tool for this sort of thing. We're not getting into it in the basics training. But yeah, there are a lot of different ways that you can use the digital objects module. It just depends on what you want to get out of it, literally in terms of exports, and get out of it in terms of accessibility for your users. Anything else, Brittany, that you want to cover? I can really quickly share my screen and just show what it would look like, what you would need to set up in a digital object if you wanted to have an embedded thumbnail.
Sure, I'm good, so I'll stop sharing.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I will drop into the chat in just a second a link to all of our community-wide trainings, or a page that links to all of our community-wide trainings. It includes the recordings of our basics training, as well as a recording of a digital object, a 3-hour digital object training that Brittany did earlier this year, as well as some notes about this specifically, about creating, or how do you have a thumbnail in ArchivesSpace, basically. So all you need to do is you need to provide a file URI like Brittany showed. ArchivesSpace does not resize for you, so you need to either be providing you need to provide a link to a thumbnail size image. If you don't have a thumbnail size image, there are some like tools online that can resize photographs for you, but whatever size photograph this links to is what you're going to get. So if it's a huge photo, you're going to have a huge photo embedded in ArchivesSpace. It's not going to be a thumbnail, but you need to have that resolvable link there. It doesn't matter what you put for the use statement. That doesn't control whether or not the thumbnail embeds, but if you want to say that it's a thumbnail image, you can do that. And then the two things that are really important, you need to make sure the Xlink actuate attribute is set to on request, and the Xlink show attribute, I think, should be embed, actually. The Xlink show attribute needs to be set to embed. I think
actuate is on load.
Is it on load? Yeah, why? Okay, what image? Everyone forget what I'm just doing. Why is that embedding? Okay, so let me pop back. All right, yeah, it needs to be on load and embed. And I put the correct instructions in the Q&A, and I'll put those in the chat as well in just a second. But it needs to be set to on load and embed. And if you do that, then you will end up with an embedded image. I think this is actually an image. If I had to guess, I would say Malaka created this example. Anything that has a cat in it, I assume is Malaka. So I did not actually create this one. I don't take credit for this cute kitty, but this is what we'll show. And like I said, if you look here, if you see here, this image was not, this is not a thumbnail. This is the size of the image that was embedded. And then there is the citation under it. You just need to make sure you have those specific settings, or those specific Xlink settings. Any questions about that? And I'll put them again. I'll put them in the chat. They are in one of the answered questions, but I'll put them in the chat in just a second. Let's see what's going on. All right. Yeah, let me just put those instructions there now. Any other questions about digital objects? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We still have a few minutes before it's time to go to break, so we can cover any other additional questions you may have about digital objects. There is a section on digital objects in your are in the Help Center. So if you are an ArchivesSpace member and have access to the Help Center, be sure to check that section out. There's also a series of tutorial videos on digital objects in the Help Center, so those are super useful. If you are not an ArchivesSpace member and don't have access to the Help Center, again, there's always your workbook, and then I'm going to drop directly into the chat now a link to all of those community-wide trainings and things I was just mentioning, and one is a 3-hour training on digital objects that Brittany did earlier this year. But there's plenty of resources out there about creating digital objects in ArchivesSpace. All right, any other last minute questions? If not, we'll break a little bit early. I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll go ahead and take our break about 15 minutes early. So it's a minute after the hour now. So let's come back 16 minutes after the hour, get our full 15 minutes. So we will take a break now, and we will come back in 15 minutes at 16 minutes after the hour. Thanks, everyone. All right, so earlier I was trying to show how to embed a thumbnail, and where I messed up is in this particular example. There are actually 2 file versions. There is the thumbnail version, and then there is a different version, which is the larger version, which had the Xlink actuate attribute of on request and the show attribute of new. And I showed this one and said that this is how you designate a thumbnail. It is not. It is the other file version, onload and embed, and those are the correct settings, and that's what I put in the chat. But I wanted to clarify that on the recording and just verbally for those of you that may not be following along in the chat. That was my mistake, because there are 2 file versions for this specific example, which of course is perfectly fine. You might have several file versions. You might have a thumbnail, you might have a JPEG, you might have the TIFF that is something that you don't publish. So it's perfectly fine to have multiple file versions. Just know which one you're talking about when you talk. So this is what that example looks like. There's your thumbnail or your embedded image. When you click it, you're taken to the other larger image that is included as the other file URI. So that was just my mistake, and that is how you embed an image. And then another thing I wanted to point out that popped up in the Q&A during the break. Someone asked, how do you download this digital object CSV template? So this is a template that you can get from the migration tools and data map page on our website. You just click on the digital object CSV template, and this is what you get. So this and we may go over this again on Wednesday. I'm not sure if the trainers are going to go over this, but to download this, you go to raw, you right click, and then you just download the linked file. Depending on your browser, that will either, wherever your downloads go. So mine, I would go and click right up here to get it. Some people, depending on their browser, it may be at the bottom, or you might actually have to go to your download folder. But you want to make sure that you're downloading the link file for the any CSV template. That's how you're going to do it, is by going to raw, right clicking, and downloading. If it's an Excel template, then that will just have a download button. So that's a little bit easier to use. And if you're using Excel, it's not as difficult to do. All right, so that's how you do those 2 things. And I think we're all caught up in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to pass things off to Malaka, who is going to spend the rest of our time together going over subjects and agent records in ArchivesSpace. So whenever you're ready, Malaka.
All righty. Here's the lovely homepage of ArchivesSpace. I'm sure everybody could get there. There are, as everything in ArchivesSpace, several different ways to get agent records into ArchivesSpace. We could create it from scratch. We could create it from within an accession, digital object, resource, or any of their component records. We could import it via a plugin. And they're also created if you import records that have that information on them. And again, imports are Wednesday, so you'll see some of those probably. To get an idea of what an agent record entails, we're going to create one from scratch. So to create one from scratch, you click on the create button. And then we have agent, and it has another flyout where you have to designate whether you want a person, a family, a corporate entity, or software. nobody's really going to use software. That one's kind of there just because when you get an upgrade to ArchivesSpace, occasionally the software itself will go in and make changes, and this way the software will get credit for it. We want to be able to blame the right person when something goes wrong. And so that way it'll say ArchivesSpace did it and everybody will be happy. We're going to go ahead and create a person record at this point. So we're going to click on person. And then you get this very, very, very long record. You'll see in the left navigation that it goes quite far. The record itself has a whole bunch of components. This was just a recent addition that was done to make the agent records more machine compatible with being able to share records with other software programs. So let's see, an agent record identifies persons, families, or corporate entities that have a specified relationship, such as a source, creator, topic, or rights owner, to archival materials, or to an activity such as an event or an assessment that involves archival materials. The agent record is also used for managing relationships among names. Agents are established and controlled separately from material description in ArchivesSpace and are associated with material descriptions by linking. So to start with, like I said, we're going to create a person, and that's why you have to pick, because you don't get to change this. You could publish it right away, or you could wait until the end and publish it at that point. We have this section here. See how these are kind of indented a little bit? And over here, you could see it more clearly. The record control information contains a lot of fields. This section is information about the agent record itself. It usually originates from outside ArchivesSpace. For example, when you import a record, and I'll show you an already created record later on that has this information already filled out for you. So we're going to actually skip all that because we're creating this from scratch. So let's go down to the identity information section. The identity information section is where you can add information about identifiers associated with the person. For example, if you had an ORCID ID, you could add that here in entity IDs. As you know, you would just click on the add button, and then the only required field would be the entity ID itself. But then you might find it helpful to add an identifier type, which comes from a drop-down list that is customizable. So you could add ORCID ID here as the identifier type. I'm going to delete that because I don't want an identifier type, because this is a brand new person. Nobody even knows her yet. So the only required section to fill out is the name form. And so you need to have the name order, and you need to have the primary part of name. Anything else is just extra. So the authority ID, this would come from an outside source also, and it's a unique identifier. The source is a drop-down, which is customizable. And so you could select where you're getting this information from, if you're getting it from someplace outside of ArchivesSpace. I'm going to use local sources because I'm making this up as I go along. Rules, these are the guidelines that you're following to set up the name. We have Anglo-American rules, DAX, local rules, resource description, and access. I'm going to go ahead and choose DAX. This is also a customizable list. So if another rule came along that you wanted to add, you could go ahead and add that. Name order is, you could have direct or indirect. So what this means, especially for personal names, is do you want the name to display as William Shakespeare or Shakespeare, William? Most library users are used to indirect, so we're going to leave it as indirect. A prefix, this would be Mr., Mrs., etc. And you would apply those based on the rules governing the format of the name in your record. A title, this is not the title like Romeo and Juliet. This is like the title of the person. So this would be Emperor of the East, for example. The primary part of the name is going to be the person's last name. And so I'm going to do Melvina Williams from the record we've been working on. So her last name is Williams. And I could actually stop right there and save the record, which I will, well, no, I'm not gonna do, because then all these fields disappear. It's crazy. So you could just stop there. I will point out that if you import records, the primary part of the name will include the last name and the first name and the dates. It'll all just be put into the primary part of the name. The computer is just not going to try to parse that for you. It's kind of complicated. The rest of the name will be Melvina. She doesn't have a middle name, so that's where we'll stop there. We have a suffix, so junior, senior, etc. could be added here. Fuller form of the name, so you've probably seen these in LC records where their middle name is included. So it might have been Melvina D, and they know that the D is for Dorothy. So here would be Melvina Dorothy is what you would fill out here. The number, this would be, you know, for John, same John Paul II, or, you know, Dale Earnhardt III. Went to races this weekend, by the way, so that's why that's on my mind. Dates. Melvina actually does have dates, but I want to show you a different form of putting in the dates. So we'll come back to that. Language, script, and transliteration are not required. And you guys are probably used to seeing the drop-down list that goes on for miles, and I'm not going to fill out the language, script, or transliteration. Qualifier, if there are several different Melvina Williams, and so you need a qualifier to distinguish her. So you put Gardner, or she's actually a beautician, so you could put beautician here, for example. The sort name right now is set to automatically generate. So the sort name in this case is going to just read from these boxes, and I'll say Williams Melvina. If I uncheck this, well, we have to save it first, and then I'll come back and show you how to fix that. If you don't like it how they display it, you could have it displayed any way you want. Dates of name use. That is hardly ever used with personal names, but it's frequently used with corporate bodies, and these forms, as you've seen, are similar from one type of record to another. So we'll cover that a little bit when we do a corporate body. Parallel names, these are if you have that name in a foreign script, you could put the parallel name in here if you would like. You could add additional name forms. For example, if you had a cross-reference, you would fill in these boxes if you wanted to, but you don't have to. We're gonna say that her last name is still Williams, but the rest of name, people always called her Mel. So this would be a cross-reference. And so if anybody searched Mel Williams, they would also find this record. But because this one, you notice it says it's in blue, authorized and display name, this is the form that will display that everybody's going to see. I want to fill out one other thing. This section is another section, description and information, and you have plenty of things you could talk about this person, but for right now, I'm going to only do the dates of existence. The dates of existence, you have a single or a range, and I'm going to do a range. And down here for begin date expression, or begin standardized date, I'm going to just use the standardized dates. I know she was born in 1928 and the 5th month and on the 14th. And I know she died 2013, February 25th. You have standard, not before or not after. So especially like if you're using a single date, you might want to say, well, I know she wasn't born before 1920 because that's when we got the collection. So I'm going to go ahead and save the person at this point. Oh, the translation's missing. Let's see what that means. And date expression. Oh, put it in the wrong spot. 2013-02-25. And I forgot the 0. So now you know what happens when you make a mistake. There, now it's all green. Everything's honky-dory. And you'll notice in parentheses, it put 1928 to 2013, and it got that information from the dates of existence fields. If you prefer the dates to be without the parentheses, you would put them in this field. So I would do 1928-2013, because whatever I put in here will exactly be what is displayed up here with the comma. And you notice this is about the only instance, agent records are about the only instance where ArchivesSpace will insert punctuation for you. So let's go back down here to descriptive information. You could read all about it on page 105, but it's mainly information that is about the agent. So like her birth and death dates, you could use gender. There, it is a customizable list. So right now we only have not specified in males. Obviously you could add other ones, or you could choose not to use this field at all. It's totally up to your institution. So I'm not going to use that, get rid of it. Places, so this could be places associated with the person, like their date of birth, their place of country, associated country, residence, other place of birth, place of death. Again, it's a customizable list, so you could add additional things. What I am going to do is go ahead and add an occupation. So I'm going to click on add occupation, and these are links to subject records that already exist. So you could browse. Or you could create one on the fly from here, or you could just do a type ahead, which is what I'm going to do. Oh, really? I thought I already added it. I guess not. Beauty operators. So let's do this. Toy makers. Let's go ahead and make her a toy maker, even though she's not a toy maker. So now she has an occupation, and it's a subject heading, and it's linkable. You could add additional information about the occupation itself if you want, and the place, subject, notes, and dates. There's functions, topics, language used, contact details. This you might find helpful for donors. You could add their name. The salutation is a drop-down list, again, customizable, because you'll see doctors not there, and we get a lot of stuff from doctor this and doctor that. So we added that. Their address, telephone numbers, additional notes that you might want to include. We're gonna get rid of that. There's external document. Well, okay, so you got notes, and we've all seen the notes. Add a note. So you could do a biographical note or a general note. And external documents, if you have any, you could link to that. Related information, there's related external resources and related agents. Related agents would be like, for corporate bodies, it would be name changes. For people, it might be the mother, brother, sister, whatever. And related external resources are just resources and other records that you might want to include information and links to. So let's go ahead and save this person. And we'll go ahead and publish it. And we'll save that. Now, this record is not linked to anything. We want to link it to our resource record, which is this one. So we go into edit mode. And then let's go down here to agent links. We would add an agent link, and we would specify a role. So is she the creator, source, subject? If she's all three or more than one, you would just create multiple agent records. So we're going to go ahead and say she's the creator. This title here, this is actually where you would put in Romeo and Juliet if you wanted to include a name title sort of thing. The relator is a drop-down list. It's another one of the, I don't know if it's an ISO standard, but I know it is a MARC list of types. And so you don't have to fill this out, but you can. For example, if this was the source, we could say donor, and that's on the list, so we could add that. But this person is just the creator. So we're gonna leave it as that. Interesting. Why is author before author? I thought it was in alphabetical order. So if this was an author of screenplay, we're just gonna do author, author, plain old author, author. You could do dubious author. So agents, again, you got your type ahead. You could browse, or you could create one on the fly. I'm gonna use the type ahead. Well, let's do browse. Browse, so you get here. I'm gonna filter by Melvina and select that and search. There's only one, so I'll put a check mark there and click link to agents. So now we have an agent record linked. And we'll click on save resource. And now if we saw this in the, well, we got to publish all. If we saw this in the public user interface, it would have an agent link to Melvina. And if we did a search for Melvina, it would link to the resource record. The other thing I wanted to show you about agent records. So if you do browse agents, so now let's browse the agent we just added and search. And we put this in, instead of edit view, if we did it in just view mode, you actually can see the information we entered, the dates we entered, the occupation, but here's the key thing. This is about the only place on an agent record that you could see what other records it's linked to. So you don't see that on the edit mode version, but you have to look for it on the view mode. And that it turns out to be very helpful. So let's go back to our resource record and edit, and I'll show you how to create one within the record itself. So you go down here to agent links, and you could click here on the plus, or you could click here on add agent links. So I'm going to do that, and the role is going to be source, and here I'm going to put donor and select donor, and then here I know the person doesn't exist, so I'm just going to click on create, and I'm going to say person, and then go all the way down here, and the person's name is Williams, and the rest of the name is C period A period, and create and link. There we go. And then you save the resource, and we now have 2 agent records. If I wanted to say that this thing is about Melvina also, then I would use the role of subject. You don't put it down here in the subjects because that's for topical subject headings, not for name subject headings. Let's go to another way that you could add agent records is by using a plugin. ArchivesSpace has a built-in plugin that is the LCNAF import. And so you have a choice here of searching the LCNAF file or the LCSH. We're going to do obviously the LCNAF. This is a keyword search, so you could actually put the words to your search in any order. Or if you actually know the authority record control number, you could just type that in. I'm going to just type in United States Price Commission and then click on search. And we have several hits, 1 to 6 of 6. I'm going to look at this one, but if you don't know if this is the record you really want to import, you could look at it before importing it by clicking on Show Record. This is going to be in marked XML format. So, you know, you got to be good at reading these sort of things by now. So here's the indicator information. The information I wanted to show you was, for example, here's a 368 that says administrative industry agencies. We've got a 370 field that says United States and Washington, D.C. We got some other 3XX fields that has information. We have a cross-reference here as a 410. And then down here we have 1 or more 510s, which are in NAF speak. Those are C alsos. And then we have additional notes. So I'm going to select this record, and then I'm going to go ahead and import it. If I wanted to select additional records, I could click on the select button here and import more than one at a time if desired. But right now I'm just going to do one. So I'll click on import. And it sort of goes to the background jobs page for you and runs a log, which is pretty handy. And then when it's done, you get this lovely green refresh page. And then down here, you'll notice instead of just creating United States Price Commission, it created 2 other headings. That's what these little icons are. This means corporate entity. And then these are subject headings that were also added. Let's go to the actual record for United States Price Commission. And this is where it comes in and it fills in all those lovely fields for you. So if we go to edit mode, you'll see that they're already filled in, came in from that record. All sorts of information that if it doesn't make any sense to you, then you probably don't need it. And here's some sources, information, lots and lots of information. The name form, again, which is really the only required part, has this. Corporate bodies, especially in the NAF, a name authority file context, are all covered in one chapter, even though some might be conferences and some might be actual corporate bodies. So if your heading is a conference, you're going to want to have a check mark here. So, you know, the 2nd annual conference of SAA or something. So that would be a conference meeting. Then, oh yeah, okay. And then jurisdiction, this indicates whether the primary part of the name is a place name. If this had been Price Commission parentheses US, you would not have a check mark here. But because it starts with the United States, which is a jurisdiction in the primary part of the name, you would have a check mark. This is really only important when you export data so that the tagging is correct. The language and script, United States. So it added 410s, which is nice. It also added the dates of existence, which was in one of those 046 fields for you. Those 3XX fields, that's where these come in. And based on the subfield coding in those, it put that information into the record. And then some of those subject fields were information about the corporate body. So it created those as subject headings and then added those to the record. Remember, there was one that said it was in English, so that's why that's there. But it also, because it had 510s, it created the C and C also reference. Well, the C also references with the delimiter I information in the description. So I think that's pretty snazzy, but you're probably going, oh my God, I don't want to have to scroll down 500 feet to look at this record. Isn't there a better way for my staff to work with this stuff? Yes, there is. Remember, we are all administrators of this account. So by default, we get to see everything. But even we can just click here on light mode and you see here this navigation scooshed up and the record itself is no longer as long as it was. previously. Oh, look, that's could be dismissed. So now we're in light mode. Not as many fields are displaying, even though they are filled out. I did want to point out when you go to view mode, regardless of what I had set on there for that light mode, you're going to see everything whether you want to or not. Let me go back to edit mode. So going back to edit mode, that light mode is still checked because it's sticky. So no matter what record I go to, so for example, if I come here and go to Santa Claus and do a search, because I was in light mode last time, it bounces back up into light mode this time. So that's handy. But if you feel that your staff is never going to have need to see these fields, there is a setting in the security, which we're really not going to go over, but I'm going to show you where it is. In manage groups, so for example, if you want project managers to only see light view, you would click on edit. Whoever's in this member list, right now there's nobody, but whoever's in this member list will have all of these checkmarked rules apply to them. And so by default, they are in light mode. If you want them to see full mode, you have to come in here and add a check mark. So now I save group, and anybody who is a project manager will now see full mode when they use the record. More of that can be read in your manual. And I think, oh, let me show you how to delete a record. So browse, agent, let's do price. So let's delete this particular one. You could delete from view mode or edit mode based on your permissions, because this is another individual permission that you're going to have to give people, whether they could delete an agent record or not. So I'm going to delete it from view mode by clicking on the lovely delete button, and boom, it's gone. So now that price record does not have that as a cross-reference anymore because it deletes everything that was related to it. So it only has one. So any questions about agent records?
Yep, thanks, Malaka. Yeah, we do have some questions in the Q&A, and I did drop a link into the chat with more information about agent records in general, but specifically full versus light mode. There's stuff in your workbook about that, and then there's more content in the Help Center, especially if you want to know how to turn that permission on and off. And like Malaka said, if you're not the sysadmin or admin for your repository, the person with those permissions would be the one that could set that for users. All right. In the Q&A, we have, for agents, does the contact information display publicly if you publish an agent?
No, contact information is not public.
All right. For an agent, where would you add other names associated, like a maiden name or a cultural name?
Those would probably be cross-references. So you would just add additional agent information. Williams. So that would be similar to when I added the cross-reference of Mel here. So, you know, if she got married but never went by that name, I could do Smith. And then I would put Melvina here. And then save that record. And so then if somebody went up here and typed in Smith, then they find Melvina Williams, because that's a cross-reference to that name. So Melvina Smith. And if we view published, this is the information about that person. And it has her other name forms here for the public to see.
Thanks, Malaka. And then last question in the Q&A, what are the sources? What does that mean for an agent record?
Usually, well, let's go to that price record. Those come in from their places, United States Price Commission. So you're talking about here in the source. So this particular record was imported from LC's authority file. So the source is the NACO authority file. If you're talking about the source here in name forms, that again is also the NACO authority file or ARC or Library of Congress. This probably came in from an import. There's SNAC, whatever other outside source you're bringing something into, or even if you're not importing it, if you've got some other people's records called up and you're copy pasting them and you want to give them credit or the blame, whichever way you want to look at it, that would go in the source.
Thanks, Malaka. And those, if you use different thesaurus or sources, that drop-down list is customizable. Heather has clarified in the Q&A, going back to linking an agent, the source meaning the options were creator, source, and subject. What does source mean in that context?
Oh, so let's go to agents, person. You. So here in edit, we go down to agents. We have roles, but we don't have, oh, here. So source would be donor, the source of where you get the collection. So, you could do source and I think booksellers. Bookseller is another source from the drop down.
Thanks, Malaka. All right. We're all caught up in the Q&A though. So if there are no other questions about agents, I think we can go ahead and move on to subjects.
Subjects. Let's go back to the whom. Subjects start on page 110 of your workbook. So let me get there. 110. Oh, yay. Okay. Subject records are used to control information about topics, geographic names, genre, and form characteristics, occupations, functions, and uniform titles that serve as important access points to facilitate discovery of the materials being described. These records are established and controlled separately from resource descriptions in ArchivesSpace and are associated with the sessions, resource, and digital object descriptions by linking. The terms that serve as access points for collection materials function most effectively when derived from broadly shared standard thesauri or controlled vocabularies, such as Library of Congress subject headings, art and architecture, or art and architecture thesaurus. The output formats, i.e. when you export things in either EAD or Mark XML that you generate from your resource descriptions in ArchivesSpace will be much more effective if you utilize standard thesauri or controlled vocabularies to select terms and document your usage locally so that you can apply common terms as appropriate in a consistent manner across all your resource descriptions. There are 10 types of subjects in ArchivesSpace: cultural context, function, genre, form, geographic, occupation, style, period, technique, temporal, topical, and uniform title. So we are going to create one so that you could see it. These records are not nearly as long as the agent records. So to create one from scratch, you would click on create and subject. And this is what a new subject record looks like. The only required fields are source, term, and type. So we are going to do for the source, well, authority ID again, just like the agent, if it comes from some system outside ArchivesSpace that has a unique identifier, you could put it in the authority ID field. Here in source, you have a drop-down menu that is customizable. So if you wanted to add fast, for example, instead of using the full LC subject headings, you could do that. Library of Congress subject headings is what I'm going to create. Scope notes that you could add if desired. I don't have a scope note to add for this one. We're gonna do women owned business enterprises. And then we're gonna go back and spell women correctly. Oh man, totally. There. And then you have to specify a type. And these are the 10 types that I read off earlier. This is a topical subject heading, so I'm going to do topical. So that is all that's required. I'm going to click on Save Subject. You could add additional information to this record. You could add external documents, which, as you've seen, could be added to any record, any type of record. There's also metadata rights declarations that if you wanted to say this is free and open to the public or whatever, you could declare your rights here with the license and the links out to the licensing information. But you could also add additional subdivisions. You could click on the plus here to add terms or subdivisions, or you could click on this button here to add terms and subdivisions. I'm going to make this women-owned business enterprises a little more specific by entering the place name. So this is in Nicodemus, which is a town in Kansas. So Nicodemus is the name of the town, which is a place name. So here I'm going to do geographic. And then LC likes to have the bigger name of the place. So we're going to do Kansas here, which is also geographic. So I'm going to do geographic here. And I'm going to save that. And now it adds dashes. But wait, I put them in the wrong order. Just like the notes fields, you have the 3-line hamburger that turns into a cross when you hover over it. So I'm going to actually move Kansas before Nicodemus. And then when I save this, it'll automatically do women-owned business enterprises, Kansas, and then Nicodemus. So we have a heading, and now we want to link it to our resource record. So we'll do browse resources again, and then edit this. And in the navigation, I'm going to click on subjects because I'm tired of scrolling. And then click on add subject. And you get one box. You don't have to fill out whether it's a source or anything. It's just the box. You could do a type ahead, you could do a browse, and you could do a create. So I'm going to do type ahead with women and select it and then save the resource. And now I can click on subjects here. And now that it's saved, if I hover over it, if I click on it, I got view and I could actually get to that subject record if I wanted to. Let's create one from within the resource record. So I'm going to add another subject heading. So I could click on add subject and I would add it below it, or I could click on this plus sign, which is closer to where my mouse was. So that's why I'm doing it that way. So I could click on here and click on create. So you get the same form, only in a smaller window. We're going to do Library of Congress subject heading. The term is going to be African American women, and that's a little WN. And so this is topical. And then I also want to put Kansas here, which is geographic. And then we're going to go back to topical by saying social conditions. And this is topical. So now I can create and link that. And just like the one we created before, it puts in the dashes for us, which is very handy. And save that resource. So that's 2 ways to get subject headings. A third way is the LCNAF plugin. So remember, there's the LCNAF and then there's LCSH. Both of these, and they show you the address here, and they're actually linkable. They're pulling from a third-party source, which if the internet goes down at LC might not work. So don't think just because you type something in and nothing comes up that it's a you problem. It might be a them problem. So what I would recommend is to actually click on this link and see if the service that this is pulling from is actually up and running before then, you know, going to your IT person going, it worked yesterday, but it's not working today. So there's that. Let's do, it's a keyword search. You don't need, with the LCNAF, the rest of the name box is grayed out. It does become live with LCSH, but that's just we'll call it a feature. You don't actually use that second box. You could just type everything here into the primary name box. So we're going to do African Americans, and we're going to do genealogy. And we'll do a search. And we get 2 records. And if we weren't sure which record, again, we could click on show record and see the XML for that if we wanted to. So you'll see, just like the agent record, it has all sorts of information that in theory could come across. 010 with the number, 150, 670, 667 notes, which could come over as notes if this was an agent record. Let's click on select and import. And then wait for it to finish. Refresh the page. And only 1 record was created. And we'll open it up in edit form. And it did bring over the authority ID and it did get the source correct, but none of that other information was brought over because of course there's no place to put it. Also of note is there is no way to add cross references. So if you have a term like cancer and you wanted to put in the medical subject heading term, which starts with an O, I think, and it's a very long word, you can't actually put that in as a cross reference. You only get the one heading as it is. So that is subject headings. And we would link it to our resource record if desired. Here, so subjects. And we'll go down here and add yet another subject. And this time we will browse to African American genealogy. That one here. Any questions about subject headings?
All right, thanks, Malaka.
Mm-hmm.
We do have one question in the Q&A. Can you use more than one subject heading source?
Yes. Not on, so on, you would have to have a separate record. So I couldn't say that it's from LCSH and Mesh and FAST. That would be 3 different records. One that said it was from LCSH, one that said it was from Mesh, and one that said it was from FAST.
Thanks. All right, there's no other question. Oh, there's one. I have a colleague that likes to link genre to names. Can this be done in ArchivesSpace? For example, Mark Twain photographs.
Yes. Agents. But you would have to create the subject heading first or from within the record, but you could come in here and that's where this descriptive information is comes into play. Let's go back up here. I'm going to take it out of light mode so you can see all sorts of other things. So if I take it out of light mode, you have dates, genders, places, occupation, functions, topics. So you could do it as a function, or a topic. So you could do here what, I don't remember what it was. was the topic, but that's where you would create the subject heading and link it in here to the person's name.
You can also, if you're linking an agent to a record, you, even if the person is the subject of that record, of that resource, they are still an agent. So when you can assign that role for the linked agent of subject, and when you assign that role of subject, it gives you the option to add terms and subdivisions to that agent record. So if you wanted to have something like Mark Twain photographs linked to a resource record or a digital object record or a session record, you could do it that way. You could link Mark Twain as with the role of subject, and then add the term or add the subdivision of photographs there, if that makes sense.
So Melvina is the subject, and I want to say that she has lots and lots of correspondence about her in here. So I could do a term here of correspondence. And then here I would do genre, and then I would save the record. And now she's got this. So you would not create, unlike the subject headings, the subject headings where you do dash dash and it's actually all part of the heading. So I don't have a subject heading that's just African Americans. I have African Americans genealogy. That's the only thing in my system right now. Whereas for name headings, if I click here, I could get to the agent record for Melvina, but there's not a separate record for Melvina Williams correspondence, though it does display that way in the resource record. Somewhere. Probably gotta wait a minute.
Go down, it was there. Go down a little bit under your subject.
Oh, there it is. So yeah. And so you see these are hyperlinked because they're actually, I could then go to that record, but this correspondence is just lovely, a dark color without the hyperlink.
All right. No other questions in the Q&A right now. Malaka, do you have any other wrap up or anything about subjects or agents, or Brittany, if you have any insight you'd like to add before I do my end of session housekeeping?
I can't think of anything.
I just wanted to add that you don't want to go subject crazy on your resources. And
oh yeah, this is not a back of the book index, please.
Yeah. So we have some findings that have like 80 subjects. And if you use the ArchivesSpace public user interface, your finding aids, your notes, all of that stuff is keyword searchable. So you don't have to have a subject for every person in there, and you don't have to have a subject for every topic in the collection. If it's the name of a series, if it's in a file record, your researchers will find it. So we now limit everyone to 3 to 5 subjects per finding aid. And we have a set list. So if they want to create a new one, they have to talk to their supervisor before creating a new subject. I will also say that you don't have to always do Library of Congress subject headings, especially certain like people and places and things, like topics. You know, you want to make sure people can find that information. So you may want to use local sources to create your subjects for things that aren't in Library of Congress or in those standard sources. .
Thanks, Brittany. Yeah, good tip about limiting the number of subjects that you apply. The great thing about subjects and agents is that they apply across your whole ArchivesSpace instance. So these records are shared across your repository. So it's wonderful to have subjects that you can link, especially if you have different departments and they have some related materials. To be able to link them all together with the same subject record is great for researchers, because they just look at that one subject heading and they get all of the great collections that you have. But if you apply 80 different subject headings to one collection, it kind of sort of diminishing returns there on that one. Can subjects be broken into smaller divisions like Kansas, African American, women, as opposed to one record of African American women, Kansas? Absolutely. There, depending on what source you use, you don't necessarily have to have multiple subdivisions in your subject records, and there are more broad subjects that you can apply depending on which thesaurus you use. All right. Will huge numbers of subject headings affect the performance of ArchivesSpace? We have collections with 80 subjects we will be importing. 80 plus, yeah. It's just for, if you're importing things, keep in mind that the more records you're importing, the longer your background job is going to take to run. So I will say, don't panic if you're importing records that have huge, or importing spreadsheets that have huge numbers of records. Don't think it's going to be instantaneous. It's got to create every single one of those records. And then of course, the more records you have in ArchivesSpace, you may notice that your implementation is a little bit slower, and you may just need to reach out to your sysadmin about having some space added on your server or that sort of thing to improve performance. And for things like subjects and agents and notes, things like that, once you reach a certain limit or a certain number, it's 5, it will, whenever you pull up a resource record to edit it, it won't actually, and Malak is showing you right now, it won't load every single one of those subject records or every single one of those agent records. It will just show you have multiple, and this is how many you have, and you can open them up. So that does help with performance a little bit. But yeah, the more records you have in ArchivesSpace, the larger your implementation is, and the more you may need in terms of memory to help it perform. Yeah, having more subjects does enable, more flexibility in terms of discoverability, because you can link your collections together that way. But Brittany's point is a good one, that since ArchivesSpace is keyword searchable, you don't necessarily need to include every single topic as a subject for individual collections, because most people are going to perform keyword searches anyway. And if it's in your notes, it's going to be discoverable that way.
Yeah, it really depends on if your researchers are using that subjects tab and like looking at the subjects, opposed to just going to a search bar and typing. So, and with us, majority of students are just typing in the search bar.
If it only shows 5, will the rest still be searchable? It's only showing 5. This is on the public user side, or this is on the staff user side. So whenever you're editing a record or manipulating a record, it only is it's not going to load that many, like Malak is showing you now. If you have 1 to 4, it will go ahead and just load all of them. But if you have more than 5 or more, it will tell you have records there, but you need to click to open them. Just to help with performance, because you may not even be manipulating the notes part of that record. So it will just help make everything happen a little bit quicker. It's not going to load those notes since you don't necessarily need them. If you do need them, just go ahead and click them and they'll open up.
Yeah, and the more you have in a finding aid, the longer it takes to re-index and show on the public side. So just be aware of that.
There's a comment in the chat. Yeah, if you're in the United States and you're planning to integrate ArchivesSpace with your catalog, be really mindful about the types of subject headings you're using. And the Library of Congress is, for the most part, what most institutions are going to be using.
Or like Brittany said, if you collect in a certain area, you probably can easily, in that area only, come up with a local list of subject headings that you might want to use.
Yeah.
In addition to their LC equivalent, if you even want to do that, similar to the mesh versus LCSH.
True, because you can have subject headings from multiple sources.
Yeah.
Oh, another thing I can show you. Where's the agent? Here. View. So her real name set up according to Dax is Melvina Williams, but you know, she emailed us and said she prefers to go by Mel and she doesn't want the other one to be the form of display. So I could go down here to wherever name forms is. There it is. So this is the authorized form and it's the display name. I could leave this as the authorized form and come down here and just make that the display name and save the person. And so now it says Mel Williams, 1928 to 2013. And that would be what displays in the resource record also. View here in, so now it says Mel Williams here, and that's what it would display as to our public. So papers of Melvina Williams, but now it's Mel Williams here. And if I click on Mel Williams, that's what it has there. And then Melvina is over here. But at least on the staff side, I know that this is the authorized form, even though this is the display form.
All right. Thanks, Malaka. No, oh, sorry.
Another one?
No other questions in the chat. We're all caught up. So I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping us up. But if you do have any last minute questions, please do pop them in now. This is our third of 4 sessions. So we are at the finish line. So that's great. There are some exercises, some optional exercises for you to complete between now and when we come back together on Wednesday. The exercises are on your agenda. There are 3 exercises that we ask you to complete and one that we include as optional, even though they're all kind of optional. One exercise is to build a simple digital object like Brittany went over earlier today. The optional exercise is to build a complex digital object. That would be really useful to do if you're trying to determine whether or not you want to use simple or complex digital objects at your organization. It might help clarify that. And then there is an exercise to create an agent record and another exercise to create a subject record. The page numbers for those exercises are on the agenda as well. And if you have time to complete those and you have some questions, that feedback form is there as well. The questions that get submitted through the feedback form will get answered first on Wednesday, and then we will move through any questions that come in on the fly before we move into our final day of training. Nothing else has popped up in the chat, so we'll go ahead and wrap up 10 minutes early. Thank you all for joining us on a Monday, and thank you again to Brittany and Malaka, and I look forward to seeing all of you on Wednesday. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.